There's a lot of hype around the Canon Powershot V1 right now, and I'm a part of this hype because I bought this camera about 2 weeks ago. But is the Powershot V1 actually worth the hype, or is it overrated? After my initial first impressions video of this camera, the general response was, wow, I can't believe you didn't include any example footage. And honestly, fair. Today I want to do an in-depth review of this camera, show some example footage, even compare it to some example footage from my R5 Mark II to see how it stacks up, and talk about the photo and video aspects of this camera. And overall, who is this camera actually for? So let's go. Let's get the specs out of the way first. And I have to say, this camera is pretty loaded up. It has a 22 megapixel 1.4 inch CMOS sensor that stacks up closely in size to a micro four thirds sensor. It's just a slightly different aspect ratio. This isn't a bad sensor size for this form factor, and that's important because a small sensor can contribute to worse depth of field and worse low light performance. So it's nice to see a decent sized sensor for the form factor. It can shoot up to 4K 30p or 4K 60p with a 1.4 times crop in 10-bit 422 C-Log3. Yes, this tiny little camera can shoot in 10-bit C-Log3, the exact same as my R6 Mark II and R5 Mark II. I'll expand a little bit more on why I like that feature so much. It has a 16mm to 50mm equivalent zoom lens built into it with a variable aperture of f2.8 to f4.5. And it's powered by the Digic X processor, which is the same processor in Canon's higher end professional cameras. Some other notable features: it has a 3-stop ND filter built in, 3.5mm audio in and out ports for putting a microphone and also monitoring audio, which is nice. No built-in flash or viewfinder on this camera, which is Canon's way of saying this is a video first camera. And it also has cooling fans and ports built into the side of the camera here to prevent overheating, which could definitely come in handy in a camera this small. So let's jump into some example footage. So far, other than just the test shots, I've used this camera in a handful of reels. I've recorded 2 full-length YouTube videos with it, one in the studio and one vlog style. And I've done some casual fun photography. It's clear that Canon is marketing this as a video first point and shoot camera, but it still takes photos. So how do they hold up? Well, you're missing the viewfinder, which this is kind of a preference thing, but ever since we switched from optical viewfinders to electronic viewfinders when everything went mirrorless, not having a viewfinder hasn't been the biggest deal for me. I find myself on mirrorless cameras shooting on the screen a lot more than the viewfinder anyways, because when you look through the viewfinder now, you're just seeing a small screen. And yes, there are still benefits to shooting through the viewfinder, like getting rid of glare and having a more stable shot. Whether or not this bugs you is going to be entirely up to what your preference is. You're also missing the built-in flash, which some people loved on the older Powershot models. So if you're into this for the photography and the direct flash kind of look, that's going to be a little bit disappointing for you. That being said, the raw files that come out of this camera edit very similarly to my R5, albeit with, of course, a little bit less dynamic range, a little bit less ability to pull details from the shadows and the highlights, but it's actually still very good and they're very flexible files. Now this is where the sensor size starts to show its downsides, because the depth of field you can achieve with this camera is going to be seriously limited. The sensor size combined with the fact that at 50mm you're stuck at f4.5 at the lowest, it means you're not going to get very blurry backgrounds in your portraits. Unless the subject is extremely close to the camera and the background is very far away, then you still get some bokeh, but not really. So you won't be taking any professional portraits on this camera, but that's not really why people are buying this. If you want to get the most comparable results to a professional camera on the Powershot, then shooting at the most zoomed out 16mm is your best bet, because at 16mm you get f2.8 and the lack of depth of field is going to be less noticeable because it's so wide. The low light on this camera is surprisingly decent, but it will suffer a little bit compared to a full frame camera. But again, if you're expecting full frame camera ISO noise performance, you're going to be disappointed. But when this camera is in ideal lighting conditions, the results are incredibly good. Especially shooting at a wider focal length, it can be hard to tell these photos came from a point and shoot. Overall, the photos coming out of here are extremely sharp and exactly what I was hoping for. Of course, it's not a replacement for a proper mirrorless camera, but it's a lot closer than you might think. So how about video? Good video quality is clearly the aim for this camera. So how does that hold up? Honestly, I'm loving this camera for video so far. Would I use it on a paid client shoot? Probably not. But for the form factor, again, we're comparing this in the context of this is how large it is. It fits in my hand. For the form factor, the video quality is fantastic. I shot a whole self-portrait tutorial thing, vlog style, entirely on this camera, and it looks great. There was no point in editing that video where I thought, man, it doesn't have the sharpness that it did when I vlogged with my R6. And the convenience of vlogging with this over vlogging with my full-size cameras, it's nice. I can just throw it on a little tiny tripod and just kind of hold it out and I'm good. I also filmed an entire artless video on this camera. Again, you're losing a little bit of depth of field in the recording, but honestly, it's a very sharp video. And at no point editing that video was I like, man, this definitely doesn't look as good. The dual pixel autofocus is super fast and exactly what I've come to expect from Canon cameras at this point. I don't know, I haven't done any scientific testings, but in my opinion, Canon still has the best autofocus out there. And that transfers very nicely onto the V1. The colors that come out of the video of this camera are so similar to my professional cameras like the R5 Mark II that I feel comfortable cutting between these two cameras in a YouTube video. And the results are comparable. Yes, I can put much nicer glass on the R5 and get much better results because of the lens that I'm using. But the video quality, if I'm just trying to shoot something wide, is amazing and works great with these cameras. And that's where the C-Log 3 comes in. Because this is shooting in the exact same picture profile as both of my professional cameras can shoot in, then when I bring this into editing, I can drop the same conversion LUT onto all of the footage and it will grade basically exactly the same. I did this whole reel with the clocks and colors rings that I got, and the wide angle was shot on this while the tight angle was shot on my R5 Mark II with the 100mm macro. Now, obviously the macro shot looks like a lot more high quality and there's a lot more bokeh going on. But when you cut to the wide shot, you don't feel like, oh, I'm cutting to a worse camera or a phone or something. It all matches very cohesively. Under the right conditions, looking at the video coming out of both these cameras, you would never know one of them is a quarter of the cost of the other one. Okay, enough of glazing the V1 here. Let's look at where this camera might struggle. Again, low light can be performance. I shot some footage here for an Instagram story. This was shooting at about 3200 ISO. It's not bad. Like, I still think it's usable, but we're definitely seeing the limitations of this smaller sensor. The form factor is the benefit of this camera, but it's also one of the limitations because having such a small form factor means the grip does not feel very ergonomic, does not feel very secure in my hand. We have way less buttons than we do on a professional camera, which I think Canon did a decent job of fitting all the buttons in here, but it still makes the usability of the camera a little bit trickier to get used to. For example, if I want to shoot with manual focus on this camera, there's no switch on the lens. There's actually a button on the back of the camera here, which I have to hit and then hit another button and select manual focus. And now the only way to adjust the manual focus is by tapping these little arrows on the screen. So it's little things like that that still make the usability of this camera not as good in a professional setting, and that's one of the reasons I said I wouldn't use this on a client shoot. This gets infinitely more complicated than this, but it's for the usability of it. But if we're talking about I'm just walking around town for the day and I want to take some fun little photos, then this is going to be insanely easier to bring around with me. I can literally fit this in my jeans pocket. Just like when I reviewed my R5 Mark II, I'm going to dedicate a section of this video to overheating because these cameras still can overheat and it's important to know if that's going to happen in your use case. So what's the overheating like? The V1 doesn't have a record limit, which is amazing. I'm so glad that that's becoming a standard across all cameras. So that means how long you can record will be determined by how long the battery lasts, or if it overheats, then the overheating. So our best case scenario and something that I would use is running this camera in 4K 24p for as long as possible and see what happens first. The battery dies or it overheats. Again, like the R5, the V1 has the option to change the high temp auto power off, meaning you can choose how hot you let the camera get before it decides to shut off. And then you can also adjust the fan speed. You can have it on off, auto, or high. Now here's Canon's chart for the record limits of this camera and what the limit is for overheating. It says if you have the fans on auto or turned on and you have the high temp setting set to high, there is no record limit on this camera, as in the camera will never overheat. Now, I don't fully trust Canon on that, so I want to test it out. And here's how it went. With the high temp power off set to high and the fan speed set to auto, I got about an hour and 20 minutes out of the recording before the battery died. It didn't overheat. But what we did see was the overheating warning popped up pretty early. And if you're not familiar, the way Canon's overheating warning works is you have these little bars on the screen. And as the camera gets hotter, the bars fill up. The more bars that fill up, the closer you are to the camera shutting off. But when I did this test, I only got 1 or 2 bars out of the 10 or 12 bars that are on screen. So the camera was telling me it still had a long way to go before it was actually going to shut off. An hour and 20 minutes is good enough for me. I am never going to be recording with this camera for longer than that. It's nice to know that we're starting to move past this whole cameras overheat thing. Overall, if overheating is a concern for you, I wouldn't worry about it with this camera unless you want to record in 4K 60p for like hours and hours, which, why? Overall, big win for the V1 in my opinion. Now to answer the question, who is this camera for? We have a small convenient form factor, high quality video that, especially under the right circumstances, can compare to a professional level camera, and pretty solid photo performance. Some downsides, the camera has a smaller battery, no flash, no viewfinder. All the I/O ports are on the grip side of the camera body to make room for the vent on the other side. meaning if you have anything plugged into this camera, it's going to be very inconvenient to hold. The lens is not interchangeable, and it's missing more professional features like dual SD card recording and the ability to screw a filter onto the front of the lens. And of course, like I mentioned, all the benefits that you get from a larger sensor. And it comes in at $900 US, which is important to keep in mind. I think this camera is good for a few people. Firstly, absolutely content creators. If you're in the market for a camera to vlog with or even set up and do some talking head, if you want to upgrade from your phone and you want something a bit higher quality, but still with the similar convenience of shooting on your phone, this camera will do that job very well. This camera could also work really well as a BTS camera. Because of how light it is, you can put this on a magic arm and clip it to a tripod, a light stand, a shelf, pretty much anything, and just like throw it up in the corner. Or when I filmed my self-portrait video, I put this on a magic arm and attach it to the tripod behind my R5 so I could record the R5 screen. Then for the real reason point and shoots were invented in the first place, casual photography. If you're somebody like me in my situation where you already own a nicer camera and sometimes you get the feeling that having a big bulky camera with a giant lens on it is making things just a little bit too inconvenient that sometimes you don't bring a camera with you, then this might be a solid option for you. If you have the budget for it, it would be a great sidearm camera for your already professional setup because there are things missing here. I wouldn't buy this as your only camera for professional shoots. That's not what this is meant for. But if you're willing to pay the $900 for it, it's going to be a great camera. Now, that being said, if you're comparing this to other cameras, I think this camera is very well priced for all the features that are included in it. But if you really just want a photo camera and you don't care about all the video features, I'd probably recommend getting a used point and shoot if you only want to take photos. But if you're willing to pay the $900, you're going to have a great time with this camera. Also, concerts. I know concerts are kind of finicky these days, and whether or not you can bring a point and shoot in is up in the air. But I'm going to try. In a couple weeks, I'm going to a concert and we're going to see if I can bring this in. I'm going to update you guys on that once that happens. But the V1 can be used in pretty much any casual setting and not feel like it's getting in the way. The last thing I want to address is who I think this camera is not for. I think some people are looking at this camera and assuming it's aimed at beginners, which are leading them to say, well, the $900 is way too high of a price tag for that. And yeah, $900 is getting up there, especially for an entry-level camera. But the reason you're paying that is because you're getting all of these specs that I've laid out in this form factor. That's what this is. It's about taking stuff that is normally reserved for higher end cameras and putting it in this tiny camera body with some limitations, of course. If you just want bang for your buck, best photos and videos for the least amount of money, get a Canon R50V and something like a 50mm f1.8, which together will still cost around probably a little bit less than the V1. Like you'll get insane bokeh, better low light performance, and you'll have the ability to upgrade your lenses down the line, which will give you a huge option for getting more professional results on something like an R50V if you're able to put high-end glass on it. A limiting factor of the V1 is that you're stuck with this lens. You buy this camera and this is what you get forever. It's never going to change. So if you're a beginner, that's what you should do. You should get an R50V and a 50 f1.8 if you want to buy a new camera. If you want to go used and get something a little bit nicer, you could get a full frame camera like the original R6, but higher than the V1 for just the body probably, but you definitely are getting a more professional setup. So if you are a beginner, unless you're extremely drawn to this form factor, or you know you have no intention of upgrading and it's just very casual, you just want something small and easy, I would say don't buy this camera. It's not the best bang for your buck camera, and it's not the most versatile camera, mainly because you can't change out the lens. But for content creators and professionals who want a more casual sidearm camera, it's hard to beat the convenience to performance ratio of the V1. And I'll definitely be making more follow-up videos on this camera. And I'm also gonna make an update to see if I got into the concert with it. So subscribe to find out if I can bring this into a concert. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.